So taking CAP to the next level, I'm not sure whether TypeScript is actually the thing to do that, but I will sit back and enjoy the show. It's Simon Gaudek and Michael Baudler doing it. And without further ado, let's hand it to them.
Thank you, Volker. Also welcome from my side. My name is Simon, and I'm working for Tcon, which is a mid-sized company, and we are a SAP partner. And during the last few years, we started developing some SaaS applications on the business technology platform. And when we started developing these applications, we decided to use TypeScript as language together with CAP, because when you develop applications and applications get bigger and bigger and more complex, using plain JavaScript can be sometimes quite challenging. So we decided to use TypeScript to get static type checks and better code completion, and also compiler errors on design time. And at this moment, we decided to start two little community projects based on CAP, which are CDS to types and CDS routing handlers, which I will explain in this talk. And I also wrote about this topic, how to use TypeScript together with CAP, in a blog a while ago. So you can find this blog on the sub-community network and read more about this topic and how to use these two tools and what are you getting out from this one. So what is TypeScript? TypeScript is basically JavaScript. Every valid JavaScript code is also valid TypeScript code. It's open source, but it's maintained from Microsoft. So there's a big company in the back of TypeScript and also a big community. And when you write TypeScript code, you basically write JavaScript code, but you can add some extra features to your code, which are delivered by TypeScript. And TypeScript will then be compiled to JavaScript and executed as plain JavaScript code during runtime. So, but what are the advantages of TypeScript? As said, you get code completion, you get IntelliSense, you can define static types, for example, for your properties, for your variables. So this way you also get some compiler errors and error messages when you, for example, access a property of a variable which is not existing in a type, or when you try to assign a string value, for example, into an integer variable. Here you will get some error messages, some compiler errors at design time, and it will prevent maybe or hopefully some runtime errors. So what we are showing today is CDS to types, which is basically a compiler for your CDS definitions into TypeScript interfaces, types, and enums. So you define your entities in CDS. You use CDS to types and compile these definitions into TypeScript interfaces and enumerations. And the second thing is CDS routing handlers. With this little tool, you can use classes as handlers and their methods for your servers. And you can define these classes and the methods of these classes in a declarative way using decorators for your actions you want to handle. So now, having said that, now it's time for a little demo. I prepared here a little project which I created using the CAP CLI. It's basically a very plain project containing a little service definition. There is no database definition. There is no database. There is only, for this demo, a little service definition. It contains two entities, not very complex. Order entity with an integer enum defined. And there is also association to a second entity, to items entity with too many association. So now you have this service, and now you want to get some interfaces for these entities you have defined. And for that, you can use CDS2types, which I have installed already. I installed as dev dependency already CDS2types. I have also installed TypeScript, of course, and I have also installed some types for Node and Express, which are very helpful during development. And what I also have installed in this project is CDS routing handlers and reflect metadata, which is a peer dependency of CDS routing handlers, which I will show you in a second. So how we get some TypeScript interfaces now for our service definition in our entity. This is quite easy because CDS2types offers you a command line interface. I just call CDS2types, I just define the input parameter, which is the service definition, and an output file, which is my entity TS. So CDS2types will read the service definition and compiles the TypeScript interfaces into my entity TS file. So when I execute this, I will get my entities TS. And when we look into this file, we see that there is on top a namespace for the sub-common things, for example, interface for the currencies entity or language entity. And when we scroll down a little bit, we see our namespace for our recap service, which contains an interface for our order entity, which exists of 3 fields: status, ID, and items. And order status is also compiled to an enum. When we go back to our service definition, we defined the status, which is an enum of 4 values. And inside our entities definition, we see now this enumeration, which contains all 4 types and their values. So you get not only interfaces for your types, you get also enums for your possible enum values that you have defined in your service definition. And we also see that there is an items property inside our order, which is an array of our entities. So there also associations will be resolved correctly, and you get also your properties for your associations defined as, for example, in this case, because it's too many association, an array of the items type. So now how we can use this generated types. I have also prepared a little handler, but I also will add a second handler and a second entity in a minute. So when we look into this handler, it's quite easy to read. You implement your handler. I implemented here on read method, and it returns an array of iOrders interface entities. When we look into our implementation, we see also here that I can use the created order status enumeration to access the possible order or the possible status values. I choose submitted here. You can also declare your entities or your values for your items array, which I have done here. Of course, when you do that, you have to check when you are inside the onRead method, you have to check if, for example, entities should be expanded by the URL parameter. But for demo purpose, I added this here in a static way. And you can also decorate other methods for example, on read, before read, after read, on create, all the event hooks you know from playing CAP. And what is also very convenient is that you can decorate several methods with the same decorator. In this example, I have decorated 2 methods with the before read decorator, which enables that I can split my code, which should be executed before read, into several smaller pieces. So you can implement, for example, one method which does the authentication check, and you can implement also a second method which does some other very important functionality which has to be executed before, for example, the read method. So you can also decorate some more than one function for more than one method as handler for a certain event and structure this way your code. And this methods will be executed in sequence. So at first it will execute check off, and at second it will execute do something other things. So let me switch back to our server. To use CDS routing handler, you have to define your own server. So you have to define your own server TS in this example, which creates a custom Express app, which then creates a so-called combined handler, which comes from CDS routing handlers. What this method does is basically it creates or it searches for all with the decorator handler decorated classes inside a given path, collects all these handlers and creates a combined handler, which then can be passed to CDS or to CAP to handle your request. Here you see that I basically bootstrapped CAP and served my recap service inside my custom Express app, and say to CAP that it should be handle the request with my combined handler, and at least I start the server on port 3001. So now to use that on development or on runtime, I have also defined some script inside my package.json, because TypeScript cannot be executed by default inside the Node.js runtime. We have to compile, first of all, the TypeScript code into JavaScript. And when I start npm run dev, for example, start dev, there will be executed a script inside the package.json, and this calls, first of all, a build. A build contains the build of my CDS sources. It compiles the service definition written in CDS with the usage of CDS to types into my TypeScript interfaces. This is exactly the same command which I executed a few minutes before. And then it executes a CDS build. And the second step is it executes the building of my TypeScript sources using the standard TypeScript compiler. And when the build was successful, the node server, my custom node server, will be started. So let me execute this. It compiles the CDS sources, then it will compile the TypeScript sources, and it starts my server locally in port 3001. And when I, for example, call the servers, then you get exactly the same result that you saw inside the on-read implementation. You get the order, you get the items, and you get also the given currencies. So now let me implement some further entities. For example, I would like here to implement another entity which contains a name property of type string, for example, and a number property of type string. I also define this as string variable. We will fix this in a minute. And now when I, for example, create a new handler for my foobar entity, the naming of your handler is basically up to you. You can name your handler like I did, foobar.handler.ts. You also can give this handlers also every name you want. The important thing is that the handlers are placed in the path inside what you have defined here. And it's also important that you define here that you will use the JavaScript sources, because at runtime, the TypeScript sources are compiled to JavaScript, and this line of code will be executed at runtime. So at runtime, you have to use the JavaScript sources. So let's go back to my foobar handler. Export basically my foobar handler with one single method. Let's say we want to use the after read here and do something in here. For demo purpose, I only log something in here. And at least we have to also decorate our decorator here, or our handler with handler, which comes out of CDS routing handlers. And for the handler, we have to define our entity for which this handler should be handle the requests. And here we can also use the enums compiled with CDS to types. Inside my entities definition or inside my entities TS file, I will get also enumeration of all entities which are inside my my servers. When I recompile my defined servers, then we get then we should get here also my foobar entity when I think I save it. So when I have also here enumeration of all my entities inside my servers, and you can see that there is an enum member for my new foobar entity and also for my order and items entity, and I can use this enum also in my handlers to not manually define hard-coded the entity names. So this way we can, or I can use enumeration, which is compiled by CDS to types. So here I would decorate this method with the after read decorator. And when you want to, for example, access the read entities in your after read method, there will be also a decorator called entities, for example. And I can also give this import parameter a type. It's an array of my foobar entity. So I'm getting here also IntelliSense. For example, when I access the first entry, I will get that there are IntelliSense, so that I know that my foobar entity contains a name and it contains also a number. So for example, when I assign here a string, which we defined during the definition of my entity, and for example, we change this number, this type of the property to a integer, and we recompile our entities and our entity definitions. We get immediately a compiler error saying that we can't assign a string variable or a string value to a type or to a number as number defined property, for example. So you see that you get some compiler warnings and some compiler errors here when you do some stuff which you shouldn't do. So having said that, I'm basically at the end of my presentation. And if you have further questions, please raise them now.
Excellent, Simon. Thank you. You even have convinced me to try that out.
Perfect.
So, of course, there were questions in the chat. I think the most prominent one is sort of a crossover kind of a question. Do you happen to know the Node.js runtime mentioned in the keynotes by Daniel? And how do your libs and this one play together?
Okay. You can enhance the TypeScript usage inside of CAP, for example, with TS Node, which makes the step to compile a TypeScript sources to JavaScript while development obvious. So TS Node enables you to execute basically TypeScript, but I haven't seen what Daniel mentioned yet. So I don't know what's coming from SAP there. There is also a second little tool called NodeMon. I think everybody knows the command CDS watch, which basically resorts the server every time you change your sources. And you can use NodeMon, for example, which is another NPM package, to do exactly the same in your TypeScript-based core project. It actually watches also for file changes and reads on or executes then a script every time a file changes and restarts, for example, the server.
Very cool. You answered a question exactly about that. That was asked in the chat, so I can mark this as answered. Then, of course, there are other ones like, is CDS to types ready for CDS5 yet?
Yes, definitely. In this project, we use already CDS5. So yeah, it's definitely ready for CDS5.
It might be that some definitions are not going to be parsed correctly. So if that happens, just open an issue on GitHub.
And I can also relay directly from the chat that Cap Papa Daniel has said you guys should connect because he's also convinced on trying your stuff out. So you would definitely hit a nerve there.
Perfect.
And then another question, I think there's the 12 o'clock lunch break coming up, but we'll just run over a little. With the TypeScript handlers, is there a full support for OData queries?
Yes. For example, when we jump into our own read method, there is a decorator, for example, to get the service, but there is also a decorator to get the current request. And from this request, you will get the parameters passed by the request to the backend. But of course, when you implement on read handler by yourself, you have to handle these parameters by yourself. For example, build the correct where clause, expand the requested entities, read only the requested fields from the database and all that stuff. But you can get the current request object, but you have to implement your data access by yourself.
Cool. Then Stefania asks, is there CAP support in the support portal for TypeScript CAP projects? I think she's referring to the SAP support portal. I don't know whether you guys can actually answer that.
I think there will be no support inside the support portal because this is a community-driven project. But when you experience some errors, just raise an issue on GitHub, and we will look into this issue and provide some further help. I also created sample implementation on GitHub and published this on GitHub. I will post the link into the chat afterwards.
Cool, Shakes. Then let's take on two more. The first one is TypeScript to JS compilation does not happen for a single file, but for the entire project together. Would this be a problem for a larger project with the build consuming much time?
We are, at the moment, we do use CDS to types and CDS routing handlers in, I think, 4 mainly larger products of our company. And to me, it wasn't really an issue when the project really grows, that you have to wait some seconds or even a minute because TypeScript is compiled. So if this answers the question, no, this shouldn't be a problem in my opinion.
Then again, let's take on another quick one because we're running out of time. How to provide feedback report issues with TypeScript types on CDS?
If you mean the generated types, for example, for your entities, if there is an error, if you experience an error that something isn't generated correctly, please raise an issue on GitHub.
Excellent. And the next question I'll use as a relay of sorts into the lunch break and also for the after session event. The question from Mehmet is, how did we get the decorators? It's not only about using TypeScript as far as I know. Could you please show a bit more about decorators, e.g. before read? And I'd say, yes, you definitely should, but with a drink in your hand and in the 4 o'clock afternoon session or after event session.
Okay.
And so thanks again, you guys. You stirred up quite some dust there and really hit the nerve with that session. Excellent.
Perfect. Thank you. It was a pleasure for us.